Yeah, good morning, everyone, and welcome from my side as well. The week has been dominated again by AI news coming from the US so far. And I think so long as no one else is talking about LLMs in Europe, let's do this together at Rise of AI. For the next 45 minutes, I'm happy to discuss the state of foundation models in Europe. And for that, please welcome with me 3 experts in the field. The CEO and co-founder of Silo AI, Peter Sarlin, the co-founder of Nionic and former managing director of the German AI Association, Vanessa Cann, and the team lead for generative AI and conversational AI at Fraunhofer IAIS, Nicolas Flores-Herr. Yeah, thank you for joining us. Please take your mics. So Vanessa, OpenAI kicked off this week by presenting ChatGPT 4.0, a new version of its language model that converses more human than any other AI model before. What do you think? How significant is OpenAI's lead so far?
Yeah, so I didn't really have time, but I had to make time to look at this. I looked at the demos, I think at 11 o'clock, lying in bed and saying, okay, I have to get up tomorrow for a keynote. I met Sepp Hochreiter yesterday. I think he's missing on the stage. Also, of course, a great guy in foundation models. And had to look at these demos. I haven't tried it out myself, and I'm very cautious these days with the entire marketing going on. I think OpenAI is also very great when it comes to marketing. But I do think this is a huge new stage that we're going into, and OpenAI is, when I'm talking to a lot of corporates out there, when I'm talking to politicians, definitely the number one name that rings a bell. And also, I'm on stages a lot right now, and nearly all the time. I think this is the once in quite a long time that I haven't met anyone from Microsoft yet. But Microsoft is buzzing around and selling OpenAI products. So I think the dominance of OpenAI in the tandem of Microsoft is really gaining speed when it comes to the industry application of AI. But at the same time, I think here in Europe, there's a huge sensitivity towards being careful towards US players. I think US company or European companies, they really want to have European players here. They're very open towards this. So I think we just need the right answers to this. And I do still think we can deliver them.
How do you see it, Nico?
Ultimately.
Yes, so is it far away from all of us?
I think OpenAI have shown that everything is possible, and they made the fastest growing app. That's a huge achievement. And I have to say, before ChatGPT, I was talking to my parents and they were like nodding off and things like that. And now my parents discuss with me, oh, what is happening with AI in Europe, with AI in Germany? Can't you do something like that? Yeah. So, of course, not only me, but I think they kind of hold me representative for that. So there's that. They show what potential there is in the topic of AI, but they also show that, because I believe IQ is distributed among humans equally. So they also show what we can do here in Germany and in Europe.
Yeah.
So that's definitely possible.
Yeah. Peter, that was only one in a long series of presentations by OpenAI over the past 1.5 years. Earlier presentations like the one of the GPT store have squashed many startups. Can you talk a little about how it feels for you and other founders watching these presentations? Are you excited to see what's next or afraid of being left behind?
Yeah, that's a broad question. So I think first and foremost, Silo was founded just a few years after OpenAI. We're of course a little bit smaller. We're 350 people today, but have a fairly similar profile. So majority PhDs, strong researchers in the field. but we don't see us in head-to-head competition with OpenAI. And I'm not sort of, from our perspective, I'm not concerned about sort of competition coming from OpenAI. And I think ultimately, I mean, they have a brilliant use case in, say, GPT-4 and ChatGPT, right? A general purpose chatbot. But that's just one out of so many use cases out there. And most use cases are not sort of best solved with a general purpose large language model. So ultimately, sort of from a startup perspective, or sort of any digital native, be it a startup, scale up, or even a more traditional software company, I ultimately think that, you know, OpenAI is not in head-to-head competition, and you can do much more if you rely on open source and if you specialize, because in most use cases, you don't need general purpose technology. You actually need very performant models for specific use cases that are then trustworthy and reliable for that. And OpenAI is not in head-to-head competition for that.
Mm-hmm. It's often said that the development of AI is speeding up exponentially, and Sam Altman also talked about the new ChatGPT function as something magical. Maybe it is because I hate voice messages so much, but I'm not as impressed. Do you think that we still see acceleration in AI development, or is it decelerating?
Well, I think in a sense, yes and no, because we've seen a lot of progress. I think there are many perspectives to progress. Like if you look at it from a scientific perspective, what has happened hasn't really been sort of this super accelerated development that would have been in sort of huge jump shifts. It's actually a gradual process during the past 20, 30, 40 years, right? Now, what is accelerating is all of the engineering work to be able to tap into these sort of scientific developments that have been, you know, done during the past many years and continue to be done during the coming years. We have a bit more funds into R&D to these activities, so there will be sort of a bit faster progress on the scientific side, but it's not a jump shift. And I mean, there are sort of obvious reasons why certain people talk about AGI and risks, and, you know, I mean, I think the reality is that no one knows what technology is going to take us to AGI. There might be sort of, from philosophical viewpoints, there might be good reasons to sort of spend time on that topic and thinking about what the world could look like. But I think the reality is that the sort of machine learning we have today, which is basically in terms of transformer architectures and these GPT models, is doing token predictions, like token by token. That's not taking us to AGI. So, you know, it's still creating a lot of value, and it can create a lot of both in general purpose chatbot use cases and also in very specific use cases. But that's a totally sort of different question to AGI.
Yes, let's dig a little deeper a little later. Nico, how do you see it, the question of acceleration?
When we wrote the proposal for OpenGPTX, the first project in Germany, where we said we train foundation models from scratch, we said, oh yeah, it's going, NLP technologies, we called it back then, they are just like accelerating like this. And we never, ever, because you have to kind of say, oh, in 3 years, the market will look like this. We never, ever expected the ChatGPT moment that we witnessed almost 2 years ago. So, and as Peter has already outlined, the technology is kind of age that's beneath it. So there might be another one. Stay tuned. Yeah, I'm very optimistic about that, actually.
Vanessa, the development and training of large language models requires a lot of money and compute. Companies like Microsoft can invest billions in their research. Does it still make sense for small European companies to compete for the best LLM?
Yeah, because I think the best LLM isn't necessarily the biggest LLM. So I think it doesn't correlate as much as it would make sense that size actually makes it a better LLM. I focus with the team at Nionic, we focus very much at building industrial models. And for industrial models, actually large language models often don't make sense because they're very generalistic, and you have to look at actually which data, which also specialized information is important for this industry. And then it also becomes very multimodal because language is only one thing. You're looking at tabular data, for example, knowledge graphs and all these kinds of modalities, also maybe looking forward into the field of even sensor technology. So the data points are just very, very, very different. And this is where actually smaller models come into play. And I think this is where Europe can really gain some speed. You talked about it earlier. Also, I think Silo is focusing very much on kind of building smaller models that are very focused on the issues that actually are at play, the problems and use cases that industry is working in. And I think this is where we as Europe should concentrate on. We have this huge data set of industrial data that we're actually not really putting into use at the moment. And I think GDPR has really screwed up our minds in that sense, even though GDPR doesn't actually have anything to say here because it's usually not personal data we're talking about, it's machine data. So we have to loosen up when it comes to our data strategy. And I think this entire, I would call it also a hype around generative AI. It's often only the cherry on the top, but what's missing right now in Europe is more the underlying problems when it comes to data strategy. I think the boards have now understood that AI is a topic. It's mostly really a topic of the board now, but it doesn't really go hand in hand with a good change management. And so we have employees that are actually boycotting each AI development inside a company, be it related to a product or to the processes within the company. And this is really something we have to change. And I think that goes very much hand in hand in delivering models that are suitable and have the best results for industry use cases.
Yeah, Peter, you guys at Silo try to differentiate from OpenAI and similar companies with focusing on smaller languages, and you released a new model today. So tell us what's special about you, what sets you apart from those companies?
Yes. So indeed, and I think to answer your someone could say a little bit provocative question on whether European companies should be building models and trying to compete in this space, I think it's extremely important for Europe that we are building models, and I think we can compete. Not necessarily to build a general purpose chatbot. I think that will require a lot of capital, and there might be some players in Europe that can also do such things like Mistral. So I think Europe is a small, tight community, and I think there are good activities. And then depending on what you're trying to achieve, I think you do it differently. The world I believe in is a sort of world where eventually language models will be embedded into products, and they will be focusing on very specific different use cases. And I think it's European language models is sort of, it's a values and culture and language perspective, which I think sort of is important for society overall, that we have capable models that are capturing the European sort of region-specific values, culture, and languages. And that's not happening currently, neither in closed source models nor open source models. But then I think it's also sort of from a perspective of ensuring that the value that companies in Europe create stays in Europe. Because now if you tap into closed source models, it flows to the companies that own the models. And ultimately, if there are no performant models that cover European languages, then it basically implies that that value will flow elsewhere. So yes, today we're releasing a model called Viking, which is the best model, open source model for all Nordic languages. without compromising performance in English. And that's the perspective we've taken throughout. We released a model earlier this year that covered Finnish and English and programming languages, now expanded to the Nordic languages, and we're training at the moment a model covering all European languages with the same logic. And I think that we can do in Europe. I mean, we have strong supercomputers, we have the data, we've been spending sort of efforts on ensuring that there are high quality data sets for European languages. But I think the crucial element is, do we have the companies that will ultimately benefit from these large language models? Because they need to be, AI is not creating value sort of on its own in itself. They need to be embedded into software products and platforms. And I think that's where Europe is to a large extent lacking.
Okay, but to your model, so as far as I know, GPT-4, for example, is also capable of speaking Swedish and Finnish. So why is it is so important to really train the model in other languages?
So GPT-4 is maybe to be a bit blunt, but GPT-4 is speaking Swedish and Finnish like an American. It is, because its capability comes from translation capability. The reasoning capability is built into these models because English is so dominating. It's built in through English language. And then ultimately English language is translated to be German or Finnish or Swedish or other languages. So, I mean, you don't really have a model that is actually representative to the way that a Finn would. I mean, Finns are actually sort of quite different in how they communicate. So to how a Finn would communicate.
Tell us more.
So that's one part. But the other part is really that if you then, now you said GPT-4, that's a closed source model. If you're a European company and you want to build competitive edge, you want to own and control your model, you wouldn't use GPT-4. You would actually look for an open source alternative. And then if you look at open source models, they don't actually speak Finnish and Swedish. So, I mean, I think we have a significant gap. And if we want to ensure that European companies create value that stays in Europe, then there needs to be performant models that cover European languages.
Yeah, okay. Talking about open source, I think you might get a new competitor with Nico and his team. Nico, tell us a little bit more about the Eurolingua project that you're kicking off.
Yeah, the Eurolingua project, we have won a huge grant for compute proposal in Barcelona at Mare Nostrum 5 from a Euro HPC, so that's European money. And we are going to train big and small models, as Peter and Vanessa have already outlined. We need both sizes. We need the big ones which have like a more profound reasoning capabilities. And I mean, Peter has already said it all. We need European models. We need models that are multilingual, that have seen the actual languages that coming from the member states. And we will make the models such that you can continue to train them. Like, let's say a country like Malta or Portugal suddenly finds texts in huge. Someone can take the model from Eurolingua and then continue to train it and make it a Maltese champion. Yeah. So this is something that we will also be looking into making them champions for certain domains if companies would release their data. So we hope that with this German model, we finally can also make some enthusiasm, create some enthusiasm among companies to really bring their data with, like what Vanessa has said, together with the models. So we need to train models from scratch. We cannot make an economy that is based on an API that is somewhere in other countries. And then, you have said it, we are going to steamroll other companies, as Sam Altman has said that, right? So we have to know we have to learn the art to make models. We have to use the models and the software and the product that actually employs them. We have to know the whole value chain. Otherwise, it's like I'm building a car and you're only putting the radio inside a car that comes from somewhere else. That's not a product. Right?
Yeah.
And maybe you can say it's a product, but
yeah. And how long is it going to take to train such a model with 46 languages?
Yeah, 45 languages. and including Bavarian. I don't know if it counts as a separate language, but this is just the start. I hope really with Eurolingua we will create like the spirit and also with the Viking models that really can say we in Europe, we can really do it. And the project will end in May 25. And we are starting already now with the first experiments. And yeah, you can wish us good luck. And yeah, so this is.
And do you get some money from Bavaria, or why did you choose to?
Yes, I got it on my account, but don't tell my boss. He's sitting here.
Yeah, okay. Peter, you describe yourself as a private research lab too, and working closely with Turku University. How do you see the different strengths and opportunities between research and industry in AI? So who should focus on what?
Yeah, so Silo has been always positioned as a private AI lab. When we set up the company a bit more than 6 years back, it was built around my own research group. I jumped ship from a tenured professorship with a few researchers and a few other co-founders, and we were already then sort of with a quite sharp spearhead in terms of sort of AI talent and academic background. And still a majority of our employees have an academic background. So I think it is very different though to do sort of academic research and then basically build AI-driven products. And what we've been positioned in between, I guess. I would say we've operated as a fairly good home for world-class AI talent that has been shifting from academia in order to create real-world impact. And that's basically what we do. I mean, we work with some of the industry-leading companies, including German companies, but also other European and North American, in building AI that eventually goes into products. And is being used by the real world and where you can really see the impact. And those are the sort of the people that eventually want to join activities where you can see how AI is having an impact in the real world. But I do think it's a sort of quite different activity to do academic research and build products.
Okay, but training a large language model doesn't seem to be a business model anymore, isn't it?
That's true, but I do think that it is important that we have companies involved in building these performant large language models, in ensuring that it is more than just a research activity. I don't think we can afford running hundreds of small European large language model initiatives as research initiatives, but we should ensure that there is sort of also ultimately a commercial activity at the end of that. And that's, I think, our perspective. But as you allude to, basically what we offer is a model as a service platform, a model serving platform, which allows companies to own and control. They build on top of open source. Our models are Apache 2 open source. We're happy to work with Fraunhofer or with other models out there. We're happy to see other models come out in the market. And then basically we provide the infrastructure, the tools to run the model in production, to optimize for a specific use case with usage feedback, and have the guardrails and RAG in place. So that's basically what we offer, and we rely on open source models because we believe that companies should own and control their models and data.
Yes.
Nico, there are two camps among AI experts. Some say if we want to build an AGI, an AI that is smarter than any human, we just need more compute. And others say, no way, with current models, architectures, that won't work. Which camp do you belong to?
I think I'm in the middle, yeah. I'm very optimistic that we will see something like AGI. Of course, it's difficult to talk what is intelligence and what is general intelligence. I mean, then it gets really philosophical really quickly. But I believe we will see astonishing developments. We will need both. That's why I say it's also important that we train big models in Europe. Because we would need also large amount of computes, but we certainly need new ideas. It's not an either or. Yeah. At the end of the day, of course, the North Star is the human brain, which a few watts does amazing things. But yeah, that's probably some way to go. Yeah.
And how do you see it? Should Europe focus now on building AGI?
Definitely. It's not a question. Why should we have, as I said in the beginning, we have smart people here, and it now is the time to be bold. I was sitting here at another platform, Lernende Systeme, nice word, German word for artificial intelligence round, by the way, and I said we have like 1.5 years to really do something, to make a large investment. And I mean, not only companies, I also mean politicians, EU, German politicians. We need to be bold. The time to be bold is now. We can't be like thinking about how to be bold in 3 years. Now.
Okay,
Yeah.
if Europe can pursue 2 or 3 topics, which should we focus on? AGI is one, is first.
I think AGI is like what will naturally develop if we continue to train models. There was at some point it will happen. Of course, there's a big debate about it, and I might lose my job, what I say. But I think now we need to focus on the next generation of models. In Eurolingua, we will train large language models, which I also believe is still very, very important. And they will have their market together with PETA and other initiatives. But then we need to focus on the next generation of models. Multimodal models is very important. We need to work on early hallucination detection in the models, so the models still hallucinate. And also the topic of tool learning and so forth. So these are topics we need to focus on. So and they will bring the return on investment in the next 2 years. It's not like a future thing. So it's worth it.
Let's take another look at the positive side and see how we are positioned in Europe. Vanessa, can you outline the European AI landscape for us? So which players from industry and academia should we know?
So I think maybe just to give a rough meta sketch first, I think where we're standing right now is we have a high openness in our industry towards AI. I think everyone, thank you, OpenAI with ChatGPT has understood this is going to be a major topic. It's not a hype, it's an evolution or even a revolution in such sense. I think still, and I travel around Europe quite a lot right now, and I'm realizing that many have not really understood that they have to transform their business models too. So they're looking at how can we use AI in current processes and current products. They're not thinking about, okay, what's the next leap going to be? Just to give a rough example of Amazon, because everyone knows it, of course, Amazon is, for example, thinking about, okay, will we in future still be a shopping company? Or will we actually become a shipping company with AI? Because we know so much about our customers that we don't even have them shop on the online website. We just ship it to them and then have a truck come by and collect what the customer doesn't want. And they couldn't do that now because, of course, AI is not good enough to predict, and it would be way too expensive. But in a couple of years' time, they are thinking and developing technology such as this, and their entire business model will change. And I do not see any discussions like this going on in Europe. And I'm actually quite worried, because I think we have this huge chance of kind of becoming I call it deployment champion. So I know there's some, and certainly in this room and on the stage, kind of developing large language models, but it's still a huge gamble, kind of which models will be the best, and are we going to use open source models kind of coming from the US? So I think the huge gamble we're kind of currently taking is the entire deployment side, because we have this immense industry that's very open towards AI. But I think it's the next couple of years will be very decisive of if we actually understand that this is a transformative technology and not just something you kind of put into the software that you're currently using anyway. And I think that's how a lot of industry players are currently using and looking at AI, and that's not big enough. We have to think bigger, and I don't see that happening enough yet in Europe. So that's maybe from a meter level what I'm looking at. Of course, there's a lot of names out there. There's a huge startup scene developing in the field of AI, building on large language models from Europe to lots of people are using also Mistral, for example, or your models to kind of build on. And deploy AI for the industry. I think especially the manufacturing industry is one that is very strong in Europe. So we don't have to look too far. The German AI Association with Daniel is here today. So a huge network of 400 AI companies. There's around 600 AI startups in Germany. So it's really the biggest AI network. We also built a European AI forum of partners in Europe. I just came from AI Austria yesterday. So there's these networks kind of that really have intense knowledge that are building on top of large language models and are bringing a lot of really problem solving to the table. And I think that's where we're strong in, because the US market is still very consumer heavy, and we're really looking at what are the real problems of industry. It has to be very high quality, otherwise no one in Europe will buy it. So the technology that's being developed here is, in my eyes, really high technology, high quality. And so really look out for players not only from the US. There's a lot of really good players here in Europe.
Yeah. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, a short note. I think Vanessa and Nico had good comments, and on the same note, I think we talk a lot about AI, this conference and this panel, and my company is about AI, but I think to really succeed, it's not really about AI. I mean, I believe in a world that sort of implies that software is eating traditional industries, software is eating the world. What Mark Andreessen said in Wall Street Journal 2011, and AI is accelerating that, and that I think implies many things. I mean, for AI, I think we need 3 ingredients. We need data, compute, and talent. And I think we're pretty good in Europe. We have compute with your HPC resources, supercomputers that are performant. We have talent that is world-class, ranked, universities that are ranked, research that is ranked well. And we have data, because basically everyone has access to data to build these foundation models. Now, you need proprietary data to create value. And you actually need distribution to create value. And that distribution is software products, that's scalable software products and platforms. And I think that's really, I mean, we can talk about AGI and, be philosophical about whether we're going to reach it or not and so forth. But I think for Europe, and for Europe to be competitive, we need to make sure that we have software product that can be elevated by AI. And if we don't do that, we can build good models, and we do help European companies, but we also help North American companies. And they're much further down the road when it comes to their software products and actually sitting at scalable business models. And unless we sort of tackle that with our traditional industry, not only in Germany, but also in the Nordics, I think we will have a significant problem, independent of how good models we build.
Vanessa, with Nionic, you started your own AI company that fell apart due to internal differences. Would you say it is still worth getting back into the AI race, and what would you focus on next?
Well, I can't speak about myself personally, but I think it's always worth founding a company. I learned immensely much over the course of the last year. So it was definitely worth the gamble. And I think we still left our mark and imprint on this industry in Europe. So I would recommend everyone who's thinking about starting a company think twice, because it's not good for your work-life balance. And everyone is saying you look so much calmer and happier right now, because my work-life balance right now is quite good. But still, I think it's worth the gamble, and we have to reach high, and I still believe in that. And of course, the next leap I'm going into will also be a high reach.
Okay, you attempted a collaboration between Europe and China. US companies are trying to cut every connection to China meanwhile. Do you still see potential here, or has the model failed?
I do see potential, to be honest, because China is doing a lot in the field of AI, and they're doing really, really great work. Also, of course, there's from a B2C perspective, we were focusing very much on B2B. There's of course a high risk at it, and we spoke very intensely in the team on how to make it possible that we secure IP security and data security, but also the infrastructure here in Europe, and that was of course a huge gatekeeper, and had really good solutions for all of these things. So I believe it is possible. And we had an amazing team in Shanghai that worked very intensely with us. It was a good collaboration on that side, because of course lots of team members came from Baidu or Alibaba, also the universities in Beijing and Shanghai that are focusing on developing large language models. So experts really in large language technology, and that's actually quite difficult to come by in Europe when you're looking at the talent structure, because you have to hire them back from the US. As a startup company, it enabled us to grow quite quickly. We grew to 35 by 9 months, and that's still very difficult, to be honest, as a startup company in Germany. Even if you look at the contracts, lots of people are in non-compete clauses. Also takes experts to kind of join the team around 6 months. So it kind of gave us a couple of chances, even though it also made a lot of things more complicated. And of course, it needed the commitment of the entire team, and that sadly wasn't there.
Peter, how do you see it? Should we cooperate more within Europe? Should we rely on partnerships with the US, with China, or even look for new partners, for example, in the Middle East?
I think it depends on what we refer to in terms of work together with and build partnerships. I mean, if we refer to the sort of three components that I referred to earlier, data, talent, and compute, then that's one thing. And then if you think about sort of eventually distribution, that's or basically where eventually AI gets deployed, which is sort of products. That's another element. But I think, I mean, we have some of the world's most talented people in AI in the academic community, and we are continuously sort of producing more talent in Europe. We should ensure that we're retaining that talent, and of course attracting more as well. I do think we sort of have a challenge in ensuring that the most talented people stay. I ultimately, when it comes to all of these problems, I think we should ensure that there are moonshot initiatives. It's not enough to have sort of hundreds of small AI startups. We need to have a few moonshots that are capable of attracting the best, and then eventually capable of ensuring that we are competitive.
What about you? Your favorite partner still is Peter, or?
Peter is certainly among my favorite partners, but in Eurolinga we are collaborating also with AI Sweden, who also collaborates. So it's a European family, and from this European research, and also I have to underline in my team we also develop solutions. So we also were the first ones that had like where you could talk to a car, like ChatGPT, and that was 1 month before ChatGPT came out. So we can bring also things into application, and we do that in one team. That this is also what my team is doing, and so I think this is really, and this work of course inspired the guys who train the models, and I think talent is very, very important, and yeah.
Before we conclude, I want to hear a short statement from each of you. If we meet here again next year, what gives you hope that the gap to US companies hasn't widened? Who wants to start?
What gives us hope that the gap has not widened?
Yeah.
Today, I think what gives us hope is that we are doing very well on the three ingredients. We're doing very well in terms of having compute in Europe, having talent in Europe, and having access to data. I think a key question is, are we able to actually ensure that those are channeled in the correct way to ensure that there are competitive initiatives, probably then fairly large initiatives. And then I think I'm gradually seeing that there's more of a discussion on the transformation that needs to happen in European companies around actually being, I usually say same way that car manufacturers started to talk about software-defined vehicles. Every European company should talk about the software-defined enterprise or software-defined business, because ultimately you need to be that. And I think if we are here in 1 year and we can see that companies are gradually understanding that they need to be software-defined, then I'm happy.
Yeah. Vanessa, what about you?
I think I want to add on kind of your last point, because that's really important to me. I think I do believe we can become deployment world champions here in Europe. We have everything it needs, from the data to the strong industry to the interest and enthusiasm, I think, in the boards now. But I really do hope that the answer is not Microsoft. And that's my biggest anxiety right now, because that's the answer that many companies are actually seeing right now. Yeah. And I think the fight was led actually when we discussed GaiaX, for example, in Germany. So when a lot of companies decided, okay, we're going cloud, but the cloud will be Azure, so our data is there. And now Microsoft is kind of on every stage and saying, hey, my Copilot here and our products. And we have so many really great startups in Europe that have a lot of really good answers for industry out there. So it needs conferences like these and ecosystems building. And I'm very enthusiastic, I think, how much we as a European community have also grown together. So that we can see it as a strength being in Europe and not as something that separates us when it comes to the borders. And so that's my enthusiasm, that I think the openness is there. We just have to make it possible that it's a European answer.
Anything to add?
No, they took away all my punchlines. So no, really, I think it's important that companies learn that they have to own their AI, otherwise their data is going out. And this is basically for this open source models from this European family I just described will be very important, because they are trained on European languages. And of course, if they use these models, we in the future will make better models and new approaches. So and this has to if this machinery works like a push, and from us the models, and the pull from the industry, not only like small proof of concept project, but really big projects. We can do that. Silo and Mistral. And then I will sit here and say, yes, what I have said a year ago works fine.
So looking forward to discussing the same topic with you next year again. Thank you again for joining us on stage. Thank you, audience, for listening. Have a wonderful conference day.
Thank you. Thank you, Larissa.